The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Maya stepped out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She adjusted the sleek black blazer over her shoulders, inhaled deeply, and walked toward the conference room. She had been waiting for this moment, though the twist she hadn't anticipated made her heart skip a beat. As soon as she opened the door, her eyes met his, Jonathan, her ex-husband, the man who had once promised forever and walked away. The man who had never really left her heart. He looked up from the pile of resumes in front of him, his expression freezing for a fraction of a second before settling into polite professionalism. But Maya knew that fleeting flicker of recognition. She had lived with it in her dreams, in quiet moments when the past clawed at her peace. Now here he was, sitting in judgment of her career potential, the audacity, and yet she forced herself to smile, to maintain composure. She stepped into the room with poise. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the inner storm. "Good morning," Jonathan replied, his tone clipped, formal, betraying a hint of tension. "Please have a seat." Maya's gaze swept over the room before landing back on him. The air between them was thick, charged with unspoken words, memories, regrets, and what-ifs. She sat, crossed her legs, and placed her resume on the table, though she knew he had already seen her credentials before this moment. She had prepared for every possible question, rehearsed every possible answer, but this was raw, unpredictable. "So," he began, scanning her resume, though his eyes kept flicking up to meet hers. "I see you've had quite a journey since we last met." Maya's lips pressed together to hide a smile. The tension in his voice, the carefully measured words, betrayed more than he realized. "Yes," she said simply, "it's been a journey." The interview began like any other, questions about experience, leadership, management style, but every answer she gave carried a subtle edge of defiance, a quiet power that made Jonathan sit straighter. She could sense the recalibration in his gaze. He had underestimated her before, and now he had to contend with the woman she had become, not just professionally, but personally. Stronger, resilient, unyielding. As the interview progressed, Maya's mind drifted briefly to the past. The dinners, the laughter, the quiet moments in their small apartment that had felt like the whole world. The arguments that had escalated into harsh words, and the eventual decision to part ways. She had loved him then, and though her love had shifted over time into something steadier, something that no longer required his validation, a part of her heart still flickered when she saw him now. "Can you tell me about a time you had to handle a critical situation under pressure?" Jonathan asked, breaking her reverie. Maya smiled, recalling the early days of her career when she had been doubted, dismissed, even dismissed outright because of her background, her gender, her race. "Absolutely," she said. "There was a project where the stakes were high, deadlines were impossible, and the team morale was low. I took initiative, reassigned responsibilities based on individual strengths, and worked overtime to ensure the goals were not only met, but exceeded. By the end of it, the client was thrilled, and the team learned to trust their own potential." Jonathan nodded slowly, jotting notes, but his eyes lingered a moment longer than professional etiquette demanded. There it was again, the recognition, the acknowledgement, perhaps tinged with admiration or surprise. Maya caught it, and her chest swelled slightly with quiet satisfaction. She wasn't here to prove him wrong. She was here to prove to herself that she had outgrown the past, that she had built a life that no one could diminish. After a few more questions, Jonathan leaned back in his chair. There was a subtle softness now in his gaze, an unspoken apology perhaps, or a hint of longing. Maya, ever observant, noted it without faltering. She knew the impact of this encounter was more than professional. This was a collision of history and present, and every word they exchanged carried weight. "Thank you, Maya," Jonathan said finally, closing her resume with deliberate care. "We'll be in touch." Maya stood, offering a polite nod. As she turned to leave, her mind was a whirlwind, part adrenaline from the interview, part nostalgia from seeing him again. She stepped out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble once more, and for a moment she allowed herself a private smile. She had survived the storm. She had faced the past head-on and emerged unshaken. Outside, in the quiet hallway, she exhaled deeply. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep after their breakup, the countless hours she had worked to build her career, the times she had doubted herself. But every struggle had led her here, to this moment of undeniable presence and authority. Maya was no longer the woman who had waited for Jonathan's validation. She was a leader, a visionary, a woman who had carved her own path with relentless determination. She walked toward the elevator, her mind already shifting to the next challenge, the next opportunity. And yet, a small, quiet part of her acknowledged the lingering connection with him, the shared history that would always remain a part of her. She didn't need closure from him, she had found it within herself. The elevator doors closed with a soft thud, and Maya exhaled, leaning against the mirrored wall. She allowed herself a small, private laugh, a mixture of irony and triumph. "You thought I wouldn't make it," she murmured under her breath, "but here I am." Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down. A message from her assistant confirming her next board meeting flashed across the screen. She smiled again, tapping a quick reply. She was moving forward, relentlessly, unapologetically. And though the encounter with Jonathan had stirred old emotions, it had also reinforced something she had long known, that her worth was never defined by anyone else's recognition. As the elevator descended, she thought about how far she had come. From the heartbreak of losing the man she loved to building a career that commanded respect, she had transformed pain into power. She had never stopped believing in her abilities, and quietly, she had never stopped loving herself most of all, but a part of her heart had always reserved a space for Jonathan, the man who had once been her everything. Maya stepped out of the elevator, ready to face the next chapter. She had survived the storm of the past, faced the tension of the present, and was prepared to embrace whatever the future held. And for those watching her journey, it was a reminder: no matter how complicated the past, no matter how daunting the present, resilience, courage, and self-belief could lead anyone to triumph. If you've ever faced someone from your past and wondered how to stand strong, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Maya barely noticed the bustling office around her as she walked down the corridor, her mind replaying every second of the interview. Jonathan's presence had stirred something she hadn't expected, a mix of nostalgia, frustration, and an undeniable awareness of how far she had come. She had imagined scenarios like this in the past, but reality was always sharper, more electric. Reaching her office, she dropped her bag onto the chair and sank into it, exhaling slowly. She let herself drift for a moment, thinking about how different life had turned out from the plans they had once whispered to each other in the quiet of their shared apartment. She had once believed in forever with Jonathan, and while the heartbreak had been excruciating, it had also been a catalyst, a spark that ignited her ambition. Her phone buzzed again, a notification from LinkedIn, a former colleague congratulating her on her recent achievements. Maya smiled faintly. Every message like this was a reminder of her journey, how she had clawed her way up, earned every accolade, and built a life defined by her own standards, not by anyone else's expectations. And yet, the encounter with Jonathan lingered, like a shadow refusing to dissipate. Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming gently in front of her, trying to quiet the storm of thoughts. She thought back to the small victories she had achieved: the first time she pitched her startup successfully, the moment she hired her first team, the day she closed a deal bigger than any she had imagined. She had built herself from the ground up, and every step had been fueled by resilience, perseverance, and a refusal to let past wounds define her. A knock at the door pulled her out of her reverie. It was her assistant, Tasha, holding a folder. "Maya, the board meeting agenda for tomorrow. I also, there's a call you might want to take. Jonathan is asking for a follow-up meeting." Maya's hand tightened around her cup. She didn't flinch outwardly, though her mind raced. She had expected the follow-up. Jonathan had to process seeing her now. She had always been the one he underestimated, but the thought of facing him again stirred nerves she hadn't felt in years. "Tell him I'll consider it," she said, her voice steady. Inside, a small part of her thrilled at the prospect, at the chance to finally assert her growth in the starkest terms. Tasha nodded and left, leaving Maya to sip her tea thoughtfully. The following morning, Maya arrived early at her office, reviewing notes and preparing for the board meeting. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside she had a singular focus: preparation. She had always believed in mastery, in showing up not only ready but unshakable. And yet she couldn't shake the thought of Jonathan, waiting somewhere, wondering if she would falter. By mid-morning, she received the call. Jonathan's voice, calm and controlled, came through the speakerphone. Maya, I hope I'm not disturbing. I wanted to discuss a potential collaboration. Your leadership style, it's exactly what the company needs. Maya raised an eyebrow, suppressing the smirk that threatened to break through. He was complimenting her after years of distance, after having underestimated her. She let a beat pass before replying. I appreciate that. Let's set a time to discuss the details. The call ended, leaving her with a rush of adrenaline and a hint of satisfaction. She had expected professional acknowledgement, but the underlying current of personal tension, Jonathan acknowledging her power and growth, was intoxicating. She allowed herself a moment to imagine the meeting, controlled, assertive, commanding. She would not be the woman who had once waited for him. She would be the woman who dictated the terms now. When the day of the meeting arrived, she walked into the boardroom with a quiet authority that demanded attention. Jonathan was already there, surrounded by executives, and when he saw her, the brief flicker of surprise returned, mingled with something else: respect, admiration, maybe even a trace of regret. Discussion began professionally, with data, charts, and strategy. Maya spoke with clarity, confidence, and precision. Her ideas were sharp, her insights innovative. The room was captivated, and even Jonathan found himself leaning in, listening, nodding. He had never heard her speak like this, never seen her command a room with such effortless authority. And yet beneath the surface, the personal tension lingered. Their eyes met occasionally across the table, carrying messages neither dared to vocalize. As the meeting concluded, the executives murmured their approval, and Jonathan cleared his throat. Maya, I must admit, your vision is exceptional. I see now exactly why you were the right choice for this collaboration. Maya inclined her head politely, hiding the surge of pride. Thank you, she said softly, yet her eyes met his directly, unflinching. There was no need for further words. She had made her point. She was no longer the person who needed validation. She was the validation. After the meeting, as she gathered her things, Jonathan approached her. You've grown tremendously, he said, his voice quieter now, more personal, almost intimate. Maya's lips curved into a subtle smile. Growth is inevitable when one refuses to stay in the shadows. Her words carried weight, and she knew he understood. It wasn't just about the career or the success. It was about the woman she had become, the resilience she had forged from heartbreak and struggle. They walked out of the building together briefly, discussing professional logistics, but every step echoed with unspoken tension. She felt the old spark, tempered by years of experience and self-assurance. He had been part of her past, but she was firmly rooted in her present and future. That evening, Maya reflected on the day while journaling. She wrote about the encounter, the interview, the board meeting, and the subtle, electric connection that lingered with Jonathan. She acknowledged it without letting it control her. She had learned the delicate art of holding affection without dependency, love without surrender, and strength without arrogance. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Jonathan. Looking forward to discussing the next steps tomorrow. Your insight is unmatched. Maya smiled to herself. She typed back simply, see you tomorrow. The brevity was deliberate, a reminder that she was in control, and that control was powerful. She had mastered the art of presence, of command, of emotional equilibrium. As she prepared for the next day, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the tireless work, the moments of doubt, the victories both small and monumental. Each step had built the woman standing strong today, a black woman who had faced her ex-husband in a job interview and emerged not only unshaken, but empowered. She poured herself a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth and the clarity it brought. Her reflection in the kitchen window showed a confident, focused woman. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a quiet satisfaction, not from anyone else's recognition, but from the acknowledgement of her own growth, resilience, and unwavering spirit. The next morning, Maya arrived at the corporate headquarters earlier than planned. The city streets were alive with motion, but she moved with her own rhythm, steady, deliberate, unshaken. She carried her laptop and notes, but her mind wandered briefly to Jonathan. What would today bring? Another professional confrontation? Or something more? She shook off the distraction, focusing on the task at hand. Today's meeting wasn't just about business. It was about asserting her presence, her power, and her worth. Jonathan arrived a few minutes later, his tailored suit sharp, his expression calm, but she noticed the subtle tension in his jaw. He had not anticipated seeing her so composed, so undeniably in control. The air between them crackled with the history they shared, and yet it was tempered by the professionalism of the setting. "Good morning," he said, offering a nod. "Shall we get started?" Maya returned the nod, her eyes locking with his. "Yes, let's." Her voice was calm, steady, but carried an undercurrent of quiet authority. As they discussed strategy, projections, and upcoming collaborations, Maya noticed the subtle shifts in Jonathan's demeanor. He had always been sharp, analytical, but now there was something else, a recognition of her growth, an unspoken acknowledgement of the woman she had become. Every suggestion she made was met with thoughtful consideration, every insight with respect. And in the midst of professional dialogue, there were moments of charged silence, glances exchanged that carried weight far beyond spreadsheets and numbers. After an hour of discussion, Jonathan leaned back slightly, studying her. "Maya, I have to say, your perspective is extraordinary. You've transformed every challenge into an opportunity. It's inspiring." Maya allowed herself a small, private smile. "Thank you," she replied softly. Her eyes never left his. "I've always believed in turning setbacks into momentum. Every obstacle is just another chance to grow stronger." Jonathan nodded, almost as if her words had a personal resonance beyond the professional sphere. I never realized," he admitted quietly, "how much you had grown, how far you've come." Maya's heart fluttered for a fraction of a second, but she steadied herself. This wasn't about his admiration. This was about her journey, her achievements, her resilience. "Growth is often quiet," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "It doesn't always need to be recognized, except, of course, when it serves a greater purpose." He chuckled softly, the sound tinged with nostalgia. "I suppose I should have recognized it sooner." "You didn't," Maya said simply, her tone carrying neither anger nor bitterness, just truth, and truth was powerful. The meeting continued, with both of them navigating the delicate dance between personal history and professional responsibility. At times, the tension was almost palpable, lingering in the pauses between words, in the fleeting looks that neither could quite conceal. But through it all, Maya maintained her composure, demonstrating not just skill, but mastery over the emotional undercurrents that threatened to distract. After several hours of discussion, they reached a pivotal point, a decision that would affect both their futures. Jonathan leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Maya, I think we're in agreement on the direction, your vision. It's exactly what this company needs." She nodded, inwardly savoring the moment, not because of his approval, but because she had orchestrated it herself. Every step, every challenge, every long night of preparation had led to this point. She was not just participating, she was leading, influencing, shaping outcomes on her own terms. As they concluded the meeting, Jonathan asked if she would join him for a brief discussion in his office. Maya considered it for a moment, then agreed. She knew this wasn't just about strategy, it was about closure, acknowledgement, and perhaps the rekindling of a connection that had never fully faded. In his office, the air was quieter, more intimate. Jonathan gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Maya remained standing, letting the weight of her presence settle in the room. "I think we've covered everything," she said, though her tone suggested she was open to conversation. He hesitated, then spoke, his voice softer now, more personal. "Maya, I need to tell you something. Seeing you today, seeing what you've accomplished, I realize now that I've underestimated you in the past, and I'm sorry, truly." Her breath caught slightly, but she remained composed. "Apologies are noted," she replied, "but they don't change the past. What matters is what we do now and how we move forward." He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I've never stopped thinking about you," he admitted quietly. "Even after all these years, even after everything, you were always in my mind." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The words were raw, honest, and yet they didn't sway her from the ground she had claimed for herself. She allowed a pause, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Jonathan," she said finally, "I've never stopped loving the idea of us, But I've also never stopped loving myself. That balance, that's what has brought me here. That's what has made me who I am today. He looked at her, a mixture of admiration, longing, and perhaps regret flickering across his face. I see that, he whispered. They stood in silence for a moment, the past and present converging in a delicate tension that neither could fully articulate. Maya's mind flashed back to their first kiss, their laughter, the arguments, the heartbreak, and then to her countless nights of perseverance, building her career, reclaiming her power. She realized in that instant that the love she had for herself had always been the foundation, the anchor, the force that had allowed her to thrive despite loss. Finally, she broke the silence. We've both changed, she said softly, but I've learned that change doesn't erase what we felt, it refines it. We can acknowledge the past, learn from it, but it no longer defines us. Jonathan nodded, his expression contemplative. You're remarkable, Maya. I should have recognized it sooner. You didn't, she replied, her tone calm, strong, and unwavering. But that's okay. Life has a way of showing us the truth when we're ready to see it. The conversation shifted then, gently returning to professional matters. They discussed timelines, potential obstacles, and next steps, but the personal undercurrent remained, a quiet reminder of their shared history and the growth that had emerged from it. Maya's presence was commanding, yet graceful. Her intellect, her experience, and her emotional resilience shone through every word and action. Later that evening, Maya sat at her desk, reflecting on the day's events. The meetings had been successful, her strategies well received, and her position undeniable. And yet, the encounter with Jonathan lingered in her mind, not as a distraction, but as a mirror reflecting how far she had come, how much she had grown, and the depth of the love and respect she now carried for herself. She reached for her journal, pen in hand, and wrote, "Today was a reminder that true strength comes from balance, acknowledging the past without being chained to it, embracing growth without arrogance, and loving fully without losing yourself. I've faced history and emerged intact. I am whole." Her phone buzzed, a message from Jonathan. "Meeting today was enlightening. I respect and admire you more than I ever have. Tomorrow, let's finalize the plans." Maya smiled softly, typing back succinctly, looking forward to it. There was no need for more. The acknowledgement, the connection, the respect, they were enough. She had faced the storm, faced her ex, and emerged not only unshaken but empowered. And for those witnessing her journey, it was a testament. Resilience, courage, and self-belief could overcome any obstacle, any heartbreak, and any challenge. The next morning, Maya arrived at the office feeling a quiet resolve. She had rehearsed her points, anticipated every potential challenge, and steeled herself for the follow-up meeting with Jonathan. Today was not just about business. It was about asserting her authority, showing him that she had grown, and solidifying the respect she had earned over years of tireless work. She entered the conference room and found Jonathan already waiting, his expression unreadable. There was a brief pause as their eyes met, charged with unspoken memories and the tension of everything left unsaid. For a moment, the past threatened to seep into the present, but Maya pushed it aside, grounding herself in the here and now. "Good morning, Maya," Jonathan said, his voice measured but softer than before. "I trust you're ready to move forward." She nodded, taking a seat with confidence. "Absolutely. Let's focus on the objectives and the outcomes we want to achieve." The discussion began professionally, delving into strategies, deadlines, and project goals. Maya outlined her vision with clarity and precision, her voice unwavering, commanding the room. Jonathan listened, occasionally interjecting with questions, but it was clear that he was both impressed and slightly unsettled by her authority. She had grown into a leader he had never anticipated. At one point, he leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Maya, I have to admit your approach is unlike anything I've seen. It's innovative, decisive, and impressive." She allowed a small, knowing smile. "Thank you. I believe challenges are opportunities in disguise, and leadership requires both courage and foresight." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the world outside the room seemed to fade. The tension between them, electric and unavoidable, hung in the air. Jonathan's admiration was clear, but there was also a vulnerability, a recognition of the years lost, the moments that could never be reclaimed. Maya, however, remained grounded. She had learned to separate past emotions from present reality. She could acknowledge the lingering connection without letting it compromise her authority. After several hours of discussion, they reached a critical decision point. Jonathan paused, looking at her intently. Maya, your insights have been invaluable. I realize now that you're not just the right person for this collaboration, you are the guiding force it needs. I underestimated you before, and I won't make that mistake again. Maya's heart fluttered slightly, but she didn't let it show. Acknowledgement is appreciated, she said, her tone calm and deliberate. What matters is the action we take moving forward. Results speak louder than apologies. He nodded, visibly impressed, and the rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly. Maya's ideas were implemented, timelines agreed upon, and the path forward clearly defined. But beneath the professionalism, the personal undercurrent persisted, a quiet tension, a mutual recognition of the history they shared and the transformation she had undergone. As the meeting concluded, Jonathan gestured toward her. Would you like to join me for a private discussion? Maya considered it for a moment, sensing that this was more than a conversation about business. All right, she said, her voice steady, yet tinged with curiosity. They walked to his office, and the atmosphere shifted. The professional barriers were still present, but now there was a subtle intimacy in the air. Jonathan gestured to a chair. Please sit. Maya remained standing for a moment, letting her presence fill the space. I think we've covered the necessary points, she said, her tone calm, yet open to the dialogue that was about to unfold. Jonathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Maya, I need to be honest. Seeing you today, witnessing your growth, your strength, it's humbling. I realize now how much I've missed, how much I've underestimated you. Her lips curved into a subtle, controlled smile. Acknowledgement is valuable, she replied, but it doesn't rewrite history. What matters is how we proceed from here. He took a step closer, his expression softening. I've never stopped thinking about you, not a day went by that you weren't in my mind. Maya's chest tightened for a moment, but she held her composure. She had expected this in some form and had prepared herself. Jonathan, she said, her voice calm but firm, I've never stopped loving the idea of us, but I've also never stopped loving myself. That balance is what has brought me here. That strength is what has made me who I am today. He looked at her, a mixture of admiration, longing, and regret evident in his eyes. I see that, he admitted softly. They stood in silence, the weight of the past mingling with the reality of the present. Maya's mind raced briefly through memories of their love, the heartbreak, and the nights she had spent rebuilding herself. She realized now that the love she carried for herself had been the anchor, the force that had allowed her to thrive despite loss and disappointment. Finally, she spoke again. We've both changed, she said quietly. Change doesn't erase what we felt, it refines it. We can acknowledge the past, learn from it, and move forward, but it no longer dictates who we are. Jonathan nodded slowly, a look of understanding and admiration in his eyes. You're remarkable, Maya. I should have recognized it sooner. You didn't, she said simply, her tone calm and resolute. But that's all right. Life teaches us the lessons we need, whether we realize it at the time or not. The conversation shifted naturally back to professional matters, but the personal undercurrent remained, a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of their shared history and the transformation Maya had undergone. She exuded confidence, grace, and authority, every word and action reflecting her growth. Jonathan's presence was tempered by respect, and a subtle tension lingered, a reminder of what had been and what might have been. Later that evening, Maya sat at her desk, reflecting on the events of the day. She had not only demonstrated her professional capabilities, but had also navigated the emotional landscape with skill and poise. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jonathan. Today was enlightening. I respect and admire you more than ever. Tomorrow, let's finalize everything. Maya smiled, typing back succinctly, looking forward to it. She set her phone aside and took a deep breath. She had faced the storm of the past, confronted Jonathan, and emerged not just intact, but empowered. Her journey from heartbreak to self-realization, from struggle to triumph, was a testament to her resilience, her courage, and her unwavering belief in herself. Maya leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The city lights outside glimmered, reflecting her own inner glow. She had faced her ex-husband, faced the ghosts of the past, and emerged victorious. And for those following her journey, it was a reminder that true strength comes from within, that love for oneself is the foundation of all success, and that no obstacle, no heartbreak, and no challenge could derail someone who refused to surrender to circumstance. The morning sun streamed through the office windows as Maya arrived, her presence commanding and deliberate. Today was the day they would finalize everything, the project, the collaboration, and the acknowledgement of her vision. She could feel the weight of anticipation buzzing in the air, but she had learned to harness that energy, turning it into focus and determination. Jonathan was already there when she entered the boardroom. His eyes lifted from the papers on the table, and the familiar flicker of recognition appeared, quickly masked by his professional composure. Maya's lips curved into a subtle smile. She had faced him twice now, and yet, each encounter seemed to peel back another layer of tension, exposing the complex weave of history, admiration, and unspoken feelings. "Good morning, Maya," he said, standing as she approached. "I trust you're ready to wrap things up." "I'm ready," she replied, her voice calm, measured, yet carrying an undeniable authority. "Let's finalize the strategy and define the next steps." The meeting began in earnest. Charts were presented, timelines scrutinized, and projections debated. Maya spoke with confidence, precision, and clarity, guiding the discussion with a natural authority that commanded attention. Jonathan interjected occasionally, not to undermine, but to probe and challenge her ideas, a subtle dance that tested both intellect and patience. She met each challenge with poise, her responses decisive, her logic unassailable. At one point, Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. "Maya, I must say, you've exceeded every expectation. Your vision, your execution, it's extraordinary. I underestimated what you were capable of, and I won't make that mistake again." Maya allowed herself a faint, controlled smile. "I appreciate the acknowledgement," she said, "but results speak louder than recognition. The work we do now is what matters most." He nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving hers. There was a quiet admiration there, mixed with a lingering tension from their shared past. He had underestimated her before, yes, but now he had no choice but to recognize the force she had become. She was not just competent, she was formidable. The meeting progressed, reaching a pivotal moment where Jonathan had to formally endorse her plan. He glanced around the room, ensuring all key executives were present, then turned his full attention to her. "Maya, I am proud to say that your strategy will lead this company to success. You have my full support, and I hope the team recognizes the caliber of leadership you bring." Her chest swelled slightly, not from ego, but from the validation of her relentless effort. Years of late nights, sacrifices, and unrelenting work had led to this moment. She had faced the man who once doubted her, the man who once held a piece of her heart, and she had emerged victorious, not through confrontation, but through excellence, resilience, and unwavering self-belief. Jonathan took a deep breath, his voice lowering. "Maya, can I be honest? Seeing you today, leading with such clarity and strength, it's humbling. I realize now how much I lost, and how much I've underestimated you all these years." Maya's eyes softened slightly, but she remained steady. "Acknowledgement is appreciated, Jonathan, but the past is the past. What matters is what we do today and how we move forward." He nodded, but the intensity in his gaze suggested he was struggling to contain his emotions. "I never stopped thinking about you, you know," he admitted quietly. "Even after everything, you were always in my mind." Her heart fluttered, but she didn't falter. "Jonathan," she said softly, "I never stopped loving the idea of us, but more importantly, I never stopped loving myself. That balance has brought me here. It's why I am who I am today." There was a long, heavy silence. Jonathan's eyes were searching hers, a mixture of admiration, longing, and regret flickering across his face. Maya could feel the electricity between them, the weight of years and emotions converging in a single moment. Yet she stood tall, grounded in the knowledge that she was no longer defined by anyone else's validation. Finally, she spoke again. "We've both changed. Love and respect are powerful, but they must be grounded in reality. We can acknowledge the past, learn from it, but it no longer dictates who we are or what we can achieve. Jonathan's expression softened, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. You've grown into someone extraordinary, Maya, someone I should have recognized much sooner. You didn't, she said simply, her voice steady. But life has a way of teaching lessons, and I've learned mine well. What matters now is how we move forward, with clarity, purpose, and respect. They shifted the conversation back to professional matters, finalizing the collaboration and defining actionable steps. Maya's leadership shone through every point, every decision, and every interaction. She was commanding yet approachable, decisive yet empathetic, a balance that left Jonathan and everyone else in the room awestruck. As the meeting concluded, Jonathan stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Maya. Today has been enlightening." She took his hand, her grip firm, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you, Jonathan, for acknowledging not just my work, but the growth it represents." He released her hand slowly, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, a silent conversation passing between them, of admiration, regret, understanding, and the complex tapestry of emotions that neither could fully articulate. Later, Maya returned to her office, her mind buzzing with a mix of triumph and reflection. She had not only achieved professional victory, but had also navigated the emotional minefield of seeing Jonathan again, confronting the unresolved past, and asserting her authority without compromising her integrity or her composure. She poured herself a cup of tea, letting the warmth soothe her racing thoughts. Her reflection in the office window showed a woman transformed, resilient, confident, and unshakable. She had faced her ex-husband, faced the remnants of old love and unspoken regret, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more empowered than ever. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jonathan. "Today was remarkable. I respect and admire you more than I ever have. Tomorrow, let's celebrate the launch." Maya smiled softly, typing back succinctly, looking forward to it. The brevity was intentional, a reminder that she was in control, that her strength came from within, and that her journey was defined by her resilience, not anyone else's recognition. As she sipped her tea, she reflected on the path that had brought her here: heartbreak, loss, determination, and relentless pursuit of excellence. Every setback, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had forged the woman she was today, a black woman who had faced her ex-husband in a job interview, confronted the past, and emerged triumphant. If you've been inspired by Maya's journey of resilience, empowerment, and emotional triumph, make sure to hit like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. The morning air was crisp as Maya stepped out, ready to attend the launch event of the collaboration she had poured her heart and soul into. Months of planning, strategy, and hard work had led to this moment. She moved with quiet confidence, her heels clicking against the pavement, each step a reminder of the journey she had traversed, from heartbreak to triumph, from doubt to undeniable strength. Jonathan was already there, overseeing preparations with his usual precision. When their eyes met, there was no awkwardness, only the recognition of shared history and mutual respect. Maya's smile was calm but confident, a reflection of the woman she had become. She had faced him in interviews, board meetings, and private conversations, navigating tension, lingering emotions, and past regrets. Today, everything would culminate in celebration, not just of a professional achievement, but of personal victory. "Good morning, Maya," Jonathan greeted her warmly, his tone softer than it had been in years. "Everything's ready for the launch." She nodded, allowing a faint smile. "I've ensured every detail is accounted for. Today is the culmination of our efforts, and it's important we honor that." The event began with an air of excitement. Executives, stakeholders, and media representatives gathered, eager to witness the unveiling of the project that Maya had architected. She walked to the podium, her posture commanding attention without demanding it. Every eye turned toward her, and for a moment, the weight of the past seemed irrelevant. This was her stage, her moment, her triumph. As she addressed the audience, detailing the vision, the strategy, and the impact of the project, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Her words were confident, her ideas resonant, her presence magnetic. She spoke not just as a professional, but as a leader shaped by experience, resilience, and unwavering self-belief. Jonathan watched from the side, visibly impressed, and there was no need for further acknowledgement. He had seen her at her best, witnessed her growth, and recognized the power she wielded, not only in her career, but in her ability to navigate complex emotions with grace. After the presentation, the applause was thunderous. Executives and stakeholders approached her, offering congratulations, praise, and admiration. Maya accepted each accolade with humility, yet the quiet satisfaction of achievement burned brightly within her. This was proof that perseverance, courage, and self-belief could triumph over any obstacle, any heartbreak, any challenge. Later, as the event wound down, Jonathan approached her once more. "Maya," he said softly, "you've truly outdone yourself. I've never been more certain that your leadership is exactly what this company and the people involved needed." She allowed a small, gracious smile. "Thank you, Jonathan, but today isn't about me alone. It's about the team, the vision, and the collective effort. I'm proud of what we've accomplished together." He hesitated, then added, his voice tinged with personal sentiment, "And yet, seeing you today, commanding every moment with such poise, I can't help but feel a mix of admiration and something deeper. You've grown into someone extraordinary." Maya's chest tightened for a moment, but she held her composure. She had faced the lingering emotions, confronted the past, and now stood unshaken, fully in control of herself. "I've learned to embrace growth, Jonathan," she said gently, "to love fully without surrendering my independence. That balance has brought me here." He nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. There was a pause, heavy with shared history and unspoken acknowledgement. And in that silence, Maya realized something profound. She had never needed him to validate her journey, to define her worth, or to rekindle old emotions. She had done it herself. As the evening sun bathed the city skyline in golden light, Maya stepped outside, taking a deep breath. The launch had been a success, the project solidified, and her leadership firmly established. She had faced her ex-husband, faced the past, and emerged not only victorious, but empowered beyond measure. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jonathan. "Today was incredible. I respect and admire you more than ever. Can we celebrate together tomorrow?" Maya smiled softly, typing back, "Tomorrow is fine. Today was about the team, not us. Let's honor that first." She put her phone away and looked out at the horizon. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed, resilient, confident, and radiant. She had learned that true strength came not from revenge, reconciliation, or anyone else's approval, but from within. She had faced heartbreak, embraced her growth, and navigated tension and emotion with clarity and poise. As she walked home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The heartbreak of losing Jonathan, the sleepless nights building her career, the moments of doubt and fear, the victories both small and monumental, it had all led to this moment of undeniable presence and authority. She had faced the storm, conquered her challenges, and emerged stronger, wiser, and fully in command of her life. Maya arrived home and poured herself a glass of wine, settling into the comfort of her apartment. She allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, savoring the satisfaction of triumph and the clarity of emotional closure. She had loved deeply, lost painfully, and grown immensely. And now, standing in the light of her own power, she realized that love, respect, and self-belief were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist, getting her toward both personal and professional fulfillment. That night she journaled her thoughts. "I faced the past, embraced the present, and stepped boldly into the future. Strength, resilience, and self-love are the foundation of every success. I am proud, I am empowered, and I am unstoppable." Her phone buzzed again, a final message from Jonathan. "I admire you, Maya, always have, always will." She smiled, typing back simply, "Thank you, that means more than you know." And with that, Maya turned off her phone, letting the world outside fade. She had conquered her past, solidified her present, and owned her future. She was a black woman who had faced her ex-husband in a job interview, confronted the remnants of old love, and emerged not only victorious but fully herself, a millionaire CEO, empowered, resilient, and unapologetically strong. If Maya's journey inspired you, remind yourself that strength, courage, and self-belief can overcome any obstacle. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more captivating stories of triumph and empowerment. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience, and there's more inspiration to come.